Hey everybody, for those of you who are just on part 3, welcome back. For any of those of you who are brand new, welcome. I'm Amanda Aguilard. I'm the host for today's webinar and co-founder of Elefant. We are in the home stretch, if you've been with me all 4 sessions. Today we're talking about advanced features, Xero HQ, and reporting. So let's go back into Xero. We're going to actually start with advanced features. This used to be called advisor features. So Xero redid the navigation. It's been about a year now. But there used to be a tab at the top here called advisor, and it only showed up if you had advisor access, which you likely do as a if you're likely an accountant or bookkeeper. So hopefully you've got full access to what you need. But it would show up and it had all the stuff in it that could be used for evil if not used correctly. And we're going to talk about that. So now though, they've moved most of those features under accounting and advanced. So old advisor features are now, it's basically this section on the left. These are advanced features. So a couple of things I just want to point out, because these are useful, especially if you're managing folks, or if you have to, shall we say, assert to a client that you've done something or not done something. Here are a couple of good tools. The first is the assurance dashboard. So this is a graphical representation of activity by each user. It's not going to be too glamorous because I created this file yesterday, and I'm the only one that's been working in it. But if you have a chance, go into one of your client files and you should see a tile for each user, and you'll see how busy each of those users has been in the activity, in the organization, by hovering over these little blocks. So these are, each of these blocks is a day. And if you hover over it, you'll see the date, you'll see the times that you were active or somebody was active, and what transactions they were working on. So it's pretty cool. Bank accounts, this just gives us some alerts about unusual activity. So it'll show that I deleted that $74 if you were on last session. So it shows that just kind of strange things that might happen. It also shows that transaction that I created and forced reconciled. So that's bank accounts. And then contacts and bills. These contacts has to do with bank account information. I don't know very many people that use bank account within Xero with contacts, and then weird things with invoices and bills, stuff that's been backdated. So assurance dashboard though does include this graphical tile of activity within an organization. Contrast that with history and notes. So history and notes is like the audit trail. Okay, so it is a time and date stamped trail of everything that's happened in Xero. So if you were on the last session, you'll see that we did a lot of bank stuff. That was session 3 was all about banking. So you can see all the transactions that I deleted, created, reconciled down here. We can search history and notes. This has been very useful for me in the past. I can search custom dates. So if I know something went bad on a particular day, I can search for just those transactions. I can filter it for specific kinds of transactions. So if I want to look at who created a certain repeating bills, I could filter for repeating bills, bankrolls, or I can filter for users. So I can go in and look for what has, who has done what. I can also click the blue link to get me to the relevant transaction. So if I want to look at this bank transaction that was reconciled, I just have to click through the blue link and it takes me straight there. Also under accounting advanced would be journal entries. Xero calls them manual journals. This is straight up journal entries. It's very vanilla, right? As I mentioned in the last session, you cannot post journal entries to cash or bank accounts or credit card accounts. You also cannot post entries to accounts receivable or accounts payable. So if you have an adjustment that needs to be made in one of those two accounts, you've got to identify the underlying problem, meaning that Xero takes the sum of all the outstanding invoices or the sum of the outstanding bills, and that's the general ledger balance. So if there's a problem with the balance, then there's a problem with the underlying detailed bills or invoices. So it forces you to go in and find the errors. But you can make journal entries to a lot of other things. We can create journal entries for depreciation, for example. So I could create a manual journal entry here, and I might do that at year end, where I say, whatever the tax depreciation is, let's go ahead and book that. But I can create a repeating journal entry too that'll post as often as I tell it. So let's do that instead. So let's say I want to book a depreciation allowance on the books each month. So I don't know exactly what my final depreciation number is going to be. And for my clients, it really is not critical, but I do want to make an estimate. So I might take last year's depreciation divided by 12 and create a repeating journal entry for that. So let's do, say we're going to start it on December 1. We're going to repeat it each month. We're going to end it November 20. And we're going to go ahead and post it. I don't need to review a draft. You can just go ahead and post. So I can say to book depreciation allowance for insert placeholder. Now I'd probably do month and year since this is going across a calendar year. Book depreciation allowance for month and year, and this narration is going to be the default description. You can change it if you want, but I don't think I've ever felt so inclined. So I'm going to book depreciation each month, $250, and part of that is going to go to one accumulated depreciation account, and part of it's going to go to another. And that's my journal entry. And so I can even preview the placeholders if I want to see this is what my description is going to be, which is nice and neat and clean. And I'll save that. And now my journal entries are going to post on the first of each month. Oh, okay. Find and recode. This is the best feature ever. For those of you who have dabbled in Xero, has anyone used Find and Recode? Raise your hand if you've used it. Okay, cool. A couple people. Find and Recode. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a Xero nerd that I can tell you this, but Find and Recode was released in 2017. It was probably maybe the best release that Xero's ever had, in my opinion. Find and Recode is, if cash coding is bulk coding, Find and Recode is bulk recoding or fixing. So what we do with Find and Recode is that we search for transactions that meet certain criteria, and then we can change them all at once. So it doesn't look like much of a screen, but if we go to Find and Recode, it's going to give us the search criteria first. Okay, so it's the first step is to create a search on certain criteria, and then we decide what we're going to do with them. So let's do a search for contact Acme. So this is our chemical company. Let's pretend like we realized Acme should not have been cost of goods sold, but it should have been janitorial expenses. So if you were on with us last session, we coded a bunch of stuff to cost of goods sold, but we've realized that Acme is in fact janitorial supplies and not cost of goods sold chemicals. So we need to find all those transactions and recode them. So I'm going to run a search. Contact is Acme Chemical. I also always put date parameters around the search. And the reason I do this is because I don't want to recode anything from a prior tax year. So just part of our best practices is we just don't pull any transactions from prior closed years once they're closed. So I always do a date filter as well. I don't know that I apologize. I think the contact may have not pulled over as when we did the bankroll. So let's go do an account, and we'll do it this way. Show me everything that I coded to cost of goods sold chemicals for the year. Maybe I didn't save that bankroll that we ran. Oh, I know what the problem is. Sorry. It's because most of our transactions are last year. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Okay, let's see if this will work again. Apologies, contact, Acme. Sometimes bankrolls, if I'm not careful, the payee doesn't come across, so that's what I was thinking happened. Okay, so contact, we're gonna do a search where contact is Acme Chemical, the date is last year, which is where our transactions came in. Okay, so now I've got 11 items that match those two criteria within the date and our Acme Chemical. I want to recode all of these to a different GL line. I can see the GL line here, account. It shows the opposite side of the coding. So I'm going to grab all these by clicking the box to the top left, and I'm going to recode. Now, when I hit the recode arrow, I have two options. I can recode with a manual journal. So I can have Xero create a journal entry based on this recoding. I've never used that, and I can't really think of a good reason to, unless maybe it's like, you know, an audit trail reason, but I always use recode source transactions, and that just recodes the underlying transactions correctly, as if it had been done correctly in the first place. So my contact is not going to change. My account is going to go to janitorial expenses. I can change my tax rate here. That's one thing I think that, I don't think you can do that in QBO, and I don't think you can change the contact in QBO either. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But we can change the account tax rate and then add location. So this is one of our tracking categories. If you remember, if you were on for the first session, we created tracking categories for location. It was Mid-City, Lakeview, and Uptown. So I can recode the location. I can also use this to add a tracking category, and this is maybe the most powerful piece of Xero. So let's start with this. We're recoding everything to janitorial, hit OK and confirm. Now all these are moving from cost of goods sold to, they've all been recoded to janitorial. But let's do a search where we want to add a location. So let's say contact is wholesale. That was another one that we did, right? Wholesale. Oh, let's do it this way. It's gonna see, this is Xero will pull in the payee line as is. So these are like transactions that came in through a debit card with weird transaction IDs. So let me see if the other one, chlorine. There we go. Let's pull all of our chlorine products or us, and let's say that the coding is correct, the general ledger coding is correct, but we want to apply these transactions to a particular location. I can use find and recode for that. Find and recode the source transaction. I don't change any of these. I'm just going to add a location. Put them in Lakeview because that's my neighborhood in New Orleans. So review, confirm. So I have a nonprofit client who uses these tracking categories for functional expense, which is something that's needed for the 990, and funding source, which is the grants. So for every transaction that they have, for the most part, we say that that money came from a particular grant. So that way in the budgeting and the reporting, we can pull that. A lot of times we won't know the grant source at the very beginning of the year. A lot of times that happens, you know, in the first quarter where they finish up the detailed budget that way, or there may be changes at the end of the year where they've got extra money on a particular grant, and so they need to move things around. This has been a lifesaver for that because I can go into find and recode, find transactions based on a GL account or a payee, and just use that recode button to apply the tags. All right, let's get over into reporting. So accounting and reports, this is where all of our report tools live. Xero's really upped its game in reporting in the last couple of years, and that used to be not great, but they've made reports much more editable, and so we're going to spend some time in that today. The first place we're going to start though is in our budget manager. So Xero has a very simple budgeting tool. If you have a client who is serious about budgeting or really wants forecasting or really wants, dashboarding kind of stuff, this is not going to cut it. But for small business clients who really just kind of want to plot out what they think their budgets are going to look like, it's a very simple tool and it's included. So let's go look at Budget Manager. What Budget Manager does is it takes all of your income and expense line items and puts them in a spreadsheet. And we can use the spreadsheet, these inputs, to as a column in reporting, so we can compare actual to budget. Let me see if I can go backwards. All right, so it's not going to let me go backwards to where our data is, so this is not going to be a great match, but I'll just show you how this works. So we are in our budgeting template. Again, it is nothing more than a spreadsheet. So we can put our budgeted amounts in each of the columns for the month and the rows for the line item. And I can say I expect my chemical sales to be 500, and I can tab over and type in 500, or I can use this green arrow. We'll take whatever the value is and blow it out, either the same exact amount for each month in the budget, adjust it by a dollar amount. So if I want to increase by $5 a month, I can, or if I want to increase by a percentage. So I can apply that and it will, you see, pull it out into our budget. Same thing with all the other costs. So you get this. If you want to import a budget instead of putting it in by hand, you can use Excel or CSVs to do that. Very simple. Okay, let's go look at more report tools. Okay, in Xero, this is our reporting main page. It's the summary tab. These are tabs actually, even though it's hard to tell, these are actually tabs. Summary has all the reports that Xero can create, but the tiles are truncated, so you sometimes have to click these more reports to get to the ones that you want to use. I would also recommend using the favorites or the star, so we can star anything that we are going to use regularly, and they will show up. You just click and toggle them on and off, and then they'll show up in our accounting, and then under this section, starred reports, they'll show up here. So if there are some reports that you use often, you might want to do that. Let's start with the old income statement. I was going to say the old income statement, like, good old income statement. But then I remembered there is actually an old income statement here. This is the old format of the income statement. We're going to use the new income statement. And I would recommend using the new versions of reports in Xero. You can see them pretty easily because they have that new tag on them. So this is an income statement for this financial year. Let's go back and see if we get more data from last year. It's about the same. Okay, so I can run the report for whatever date range I want. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a custom version here. I can open up report settings. So this will blow up and give us some high-level settings, like if you want to compare it with previous periods, you can. Cash to accrual, this one I use very often. I don't really use these too much, but I do sometimes use this filter here. So if you had two tracking categories, you'd have both of the options here. This is a filter. So this is showing where location, it doesn't matter, transactions for the entire company, but we could run this for only one particular tracking category if we wanted. So I do have folks that use this a lot. They'll create income statements for each of their locations and save them as templates. I'll show you that in a little bit, but I'm going to clear this just so we have more to work with. So it gives us our income statement, and it looks like a PDF. It's very pretty, but it's actually editable as well. You just have to hover over what needs to be edited. So we can edit our title here. We can edit the body here. We can click this little blue edit that shows up, or edit layout. It'll get you the same place. And so that turns that report into like it gives you the skeleton of the report so that you can build whatever it is that you need. So let's talk about that. Okay, so this takes our report and pulls it into a report layout editor. I'll show you the things that you can add. So we can add these pieces up at the top. So text, we can add text down at the bottom or anywhere we want, put a text box. We can do a schedule, which is supplemental accounts. So if we wanted to, I'm making this up, can't think of a good reason why you'd want to, but if you want to put your cash balance on the bottom of your income statement, you could. You go ahead and delete that schedule. We can put footnotes. A lot of people use footnotes. We can add rows and we can add columns. So I'm going to add a column. Now, when I click on column, it gives me the variations of what kind of columns I can include. I can include a date column, so this would be, another period. I can include a budget column. I can create formulas where you might have more than one column going. You can do variances. So let's do that. Let's do a budget column. If I scroll up, it's saying it's pulling my overall budget, and that's fine. And that's going to come straight from that budgeting manager that we just looked at. And I'm going to add another column that's a formula column for the variance. So I'm going to call this variance. And then I'm literally just going to create a formula like I would in Excel. So 2018 actual minus budget is going to give me my variance. And if I click done, you can see sort of what it looks like. So I can have columns for budgets, variances. I can also create columns for my tracking categories. Let me get rid of these. I can create columns for my different locations. So I could filter for a location if I wanted to just say I have an income statement for this one location, but if I wanted to have an income statement that shows a column for each location, which is pretty great, this is where I'd build it. So location is Lakeview, and then I'm probably going to add another one for, I think, trying to remember where I stuck data in the last couple days. Let's just create all of them. Location is Uptown. And then if I'm generating this for a client, I also want to put in the unassigned. And then I'll make sure that if like my nonprofit client, they want every transaction associated with a grant. So I want to make sure that there's nothing in this unassigned column. So I would put this as a check and then rearrange and recode and then get rid of this column. Let's run this and see. There's probably not too much in here for us to use, but you can see, you'll get the gist of what it would look like. So each column across the top. Let's talk about rows. So let me get rid of some of this stuff. Let's get rid of these just to make it simple to see. So our row variations are a group or a formula. So I can do the same thing with a formula where I might create a margin formula or profit formula. But the one I use a lot is groups. So has anybody used QuickBooks before and used sub accounts? Any of you guys use sub accounts in QuickBooks? Okay, a couple of you guys, awesome. So one of the biggest criticisms I hear about Xero is there are no sub accounts. So every general ledger line on the chart of accounts has the same value. They don't automatically roll up into other accounts. But what you can do is group them on reports. So I honestly prefer it that way. I like knowing that every line is the same value, that they don't supersede each other. I don't have to worry about an architecture of a chart of accounts. If I want to clean it up and make it simpler to look at, then I just change the report. So let me show you how we do that. I just added row group. I just added a group here. And it shows up at the top. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to drag and drop. So that's one thing in this editor. It's not obvious, but you can drag and drop stuff. So I'm going to go down into operating expenses, and I'm going to say I want to group all my overhead together. So over on the right, I'm calling the name of this group overhead. So it's changing it. And then I'm going to pull, drag and drop the accounts that I want to go into this group into overhead. So let's grab rent, telephone. I'm just going to grab a couple to show you an example. Insurance. So we've got our couple of overhead expenses. So I'm going to group these three under overhead. If I leave the arrow open or exposed and I run the report, I'll show you what it looks like. Bad example because I don't think there's data. Hang on one sec. Let's do this again. Give me 1 second. Let's figure out some lines that have data in them. I really need to update the dates of these, so I apologize, but let's do. Okay, so let's grab. Okay, so let's grab, we're going to grab janitorial and utilities so I can show you how to group these together. I apologize. New group, we're going to call it overhead. And we're going to drag and drop. And then let's grab, I said janitorial and meals, I think was the other one. And so these are open. So this is an open, we can see both underlying accounts, and I'll click done. And you can see now I have a subcategory of overhead, right? So overhead is here, and we see overhead, but then we see the underlying accounts, janitorial being one of them. It's still showing janitorial. If I go back and edit this and close off the triangle, it's not going to show us the underlying accounts. It's only going to show us the top line category. So it looks like one of those top level accounts like you would see in QBO. The report looks really clean. It's just a group. So using group rows in Xero really helps to clean up your reports. Any questions on that? And once we have our report the way we want it, so like I spend a good amount of time going into my clients and grouping or creating location-based reports. Once you've got that, you don't want to do it every month, so we're going to save it. And we're going to save it as a template or a custom template. So we go to save and custom. I would say this is the report where I broke out an overhead group. I can just create this income statement with a particular name. I'm going to save it, okay? And then going back into our reports tab, remember I mentioned that these are actually tabs. Custom, now I have a custom template for this client. So every month I can go in and run it. I want to show you another thing too that's useful in Xero. So if I go into a balance sheet, and we'll do sort of the same thing. We can use our editor. Here it looks virtually identical, right? Same thing, we can drag and drop, like we can move these around and save. And then we might want to add a row for the prior year. So this is going to be our default balance sheet that we're going to use each month, or we're going to run each month. Not only can I save it as a template, so custom is saving it as a template to be rerun each month. I can save it as a published report. So publishing the report is basically taking a digital snapshot of the report and saving it in a report library. So I'm going to put in my date in the title because I think it's easiest to find it that way. And now under the publish tabs and reports, this is like my report library. In our practice, I require the accountants and bookkeepers to publish that bank reconciliation each month. They do also publish the balance sheets and the income statements, but that bank reconciliation tying to the bank statement, that's a requirement. We absolutely publish that every single month. That's probably the first thing I look at when I get in a client file to review it. So this publish reports is like saving the report that you ran. It's saving the data underneath. So I can click through these blue numbers to see what makes up $897 of office equipment. Even if I went back and made adjustments to office equipment for this period, this published report would stay the same. So it would not update. So that's what I mean. It's like a digital snapshot. It is literally like scanning or printing a report, but it does keep this drill down capability. Another thing I want to show you, because this is just a weird Xero thing that I think people are like, why doesn't it do this? Or why isn't this the default? The aged receivables and payables reports. So this is one that we use pretty often, aged receivables detail. And we would have our clients, and it's a regular aged receivables report where it's detailed by each client. But one thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't total for the whole, it doesn't show you a total column. It's easy to fix if you go to report settings and click the total column and go update, then it will add a total column on the inside, on the last column. Just a weird thing that Xero does that some people are like, why doesn't it have a total for me? So that's something you may want to add into your reports. Any questions on reporting at all before we move on to Xero HQ for a few minutes? All right. Okay, so Xero HQ, when Xero released this probably 2 years ago, and it's supposed to replace what used to be called My Green Xero, which is like the landing page for advisors and bookkeepers. I don't know if a lot of people have really adopted it to use it, but we want to go through it because it does have a couple of really cool things. So the way we get to Xero HQ is by using the org name pull down and go over to Xero HQ. And we know we're in Xero HQ because there is a black banner at the top. So the idea is that HQ is supposed to be the landing page for your practice, whether or not the client uses Xero. Okay, so that's important because we want to make sure that when we start to look at the client listing, just because there's a client in HQ doesn't necessarily mean that there's a Xero organization. So the idea was that you'd be able to manage your practice from Xero HQ. A couple of things that I want to point out that make it easier to use. Under your little icon for your name, initials or picture if you have it, if we go to the account section, we can tell Xero where we want to land when we log in. So I generally pick Xero HQ clients as the place I want to land when I log in. You can pick the activity feed, which we're going to look at in a second, or you can bypass HQ and go straight to the last company you were in. Just, word of caution, if you're sharing your screen often, you don't want people to see client data. So just be careful if you're going to pick this. This is also where you set up two-step authentication and change your login information and such. Also under this tab, or this icon, we can get to Xero Learning. So this is our Xero Central now. This is where We access our renewal for Xero certification. It's where all the product updates live. This is actually super useful. So if you go to live events and see all, you would see there's, for example, virtual Xero hour, which I'm hosting in a couple of hours. That's one thing that you can sign up for. You can do the online roadshow. Xero certifications. This one's actually live. There are a few locations where certification is being done live. And then other things like product updates and so forth. So this is a cool tab to pay attention to. All right, using Xero HQ from left to right, activity. This activity tab is like a notification feed. So it gives you alerts on things you may have set up. If we go to settings, we can see there are custom alerts and there are system alerts. Custom alerts are, it will create an alert for you for if clients have unreconciled bank lines. So we can do an all clients bank alert where anytime a client has more than 50 transactions to code, or it hasn't been reconciled in a certain number of days, not 330, we can create an alert, which will give you a line on the feed. You can also say, well, I have a couple of clients where, go to create rule, I have a couple of clients where they need to be reconciled quicker than 50. So if there's more than 15, I want to know about it. That's one that we're staying on top of. So we can create these alerts that will show up in activity. Just for your information, system alerts, it's not anything you can edit. Those have to do with bank feeds dropping, or bank statement balances not tying, or connected apps. So there are certain apps that when those things happen in the apps, it will give you a system alert. So that's not anything you can really mess with. On the clients tab, this is what I was talking about, where you can have clients in Xero HQ, but they're not Xero orgs. So the idea is that you can run your entire practice here. So you would create, if you had a new client, you'd create a new client card. So this is basically like a contact in Xero. So we have a new client and it is Aguilar Consulting. I'm going to create it. It's going to create a client card, and I can put notes here. I can put information, like kind of like use it sort of as a mini CRM. That does not mean that Aguilar Consulting has a Xero file. Only the clients where you see this tag, go to Xero, those have a Xero file. If you don't create the client here, but you create them straight over in Xero, then HQ is going to put them here as a client. So it'll have a client card with go to Xero. And this is what happened for me when I created this file that we were working in last couple of days. I didn't create it in Xero HQ. I did that over in Xero. And so Xero replicates a client card for it here. What happens when you get rid of a client? In Xero, you stop paying subscription, you move on, they move on, you move on, everybody's great. It doesn't undo the client in HQ. So in order to do that, you have to go over and use this overflow menu to archive it. That'll get it off this page, because that is kind of annoying that it could be junked up with folks that aren't even your clients anymore. Explorer, to me, this is the coolest piece of HQ. And I mean, it's probably the best part of HQ, to be honest, is where you can look at an aggregate level at what apps, industries, and banks your clients are in. So I can click on the apps and it's going to tell me which apps I use the most based on actual plugins. This is not showing up because this is not real data, but if you do this on your end, you should see it. You'll see how many of your clients are on Gusto, HubDoc, so forth. If I looked at my real HQ, probably 95% of my clients are on Gusto. So I'd see that a big spike for those. But this is helpful because if there is a change with one of the platforms, and you guys know they change a lot, I can come into Xero HQ and say, okay, which clients do I have on Gusto? Which clients do I have on MinuteDoc? And I can easily see who's got those plugged in. they'll only show up here if there is an integration. So if they're using MinuteDoc, but it's not integrated with Xero, it's not going to show up here. Same thing with industry and banks. Now, I will tell you, this is important to tag your industry. This has to be done manually. You can't, it doesn't happen automatically. So you go in to add an industry. I would say this is swimming pool services, and save, and it'll roll it into a higher level category. On the Xero advisor directory, when advisors are tagged with having experience in certain industries, this is where that's pulling from. So you should go into HQ and make sure that you've got all your industries tagged. All right, reports, report templates. Has anybody used report templates? So report templates is a way that we can create custom formatted reports, but we do it at a practice level instead of the client level. We do it at a practice level and then we push it down at each client level. It's easier for me to show you with the slide because it doesn't really, it's hard to show here because this is not a real Xero HQ, so stuff doesn't come up. What I want to do is show you, this slide. So this is the general structure of how report templates are set up. So if you think about reports, we just did this with the income statement and the balance sheet. Reports are built on based on the chart of account lines, right, at the client level. So my revenues are all at the top of my income statement. There's one for each line, and then underneath are the expenses. Different clients, probably every one of your clients has a different chart of accounts. It's modified, it's different. So we can't build a practice level income statement that says under revenues, I want you to include GL account 3001, which is sales, 3002, which is returns, because every client is going to be different. So the way that we can build these reports consistently across different clients is by using report templates and report template codes. So on the reports, the report templates in Xero HQ, those reports look very much like our client level reports, but instead of having a line for each chart of account line, there's a line for each aggregate level of category, and those get mapped to individual chart of account lines. There is a place in the Xero Learning where you can see all of the mapping codes, but here's just an example of what they look like. They're 3 letters with a decimal, and it keeps the report codes keep extending out to be more specific. So EXP would be expenses, .COS would be cost of goods sold. So this line 4 on the income statement template is mapped to exp.cos. Then what we have to do is in each client at the chart of accounts level, we need to say this chart of accounts line is equal to this report code. So it's mapping from the individual client level up to a code. And a couple of ways you can do it. You can go into each client's chart of accounts and do the mapping that way. Or if you have new clients, you can actually import a chart of accounts with a column for the report template code. I would highly recommend doing that if you're using report templates because it saves hours of work in mapping. So that's report templates, and that does live in Xero HQ. So report templates live up at the practice level. All right, any questions? That's about the end of our content. Any questions at all? Anything that we've covered today? Or if you were with us yesterday, anything yesterday that you need a little clarity on? It is hard to learn a product by demonstration, one-sided demonstration. So I would absolutely encourage you guys to go into Xero and play around. Does everybody know that there is a Xero demo company? So if you go to My Xero here, which is the old My Green Xero, Down at the bottom, there's the demo company. This is your own sandbox. So this is specific to the user that's logged in, and it's pre-populated with a lot of data. You can go in and reconcile things. You can, I mean, it has all the features. It even has projects. So you can go into Xero and, do your reconciliations, click all the buttons, try things. You can even connect this to apps if you want, integrate. And then you can go back out and go back to my Xero, and you can reset the whole thing. So you can play in it, and then if you go to reset, it's gonna bring it back to the way it was originally. So Demo Company is a great place to practice Xero. Well, I certainly appreciate you guys being with me. If you need to reach out to me, you are welcome to do that, Amanda@elefanttraining.com. If you want to reach out to me with questions about Xero, happy to answer them, Amanda@elefanttraining.com, the way it's spelled here. You can reach out to me. I'm all over social media, so I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram recently because my 16-year-old daughter told me I needed to be, not sure why, and LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me on those platforms, and don't forget to do your surveys, and I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Take care.